Welcome back to the channel. I know this video is literally 3 weeks late, but I don't care. I was sick and tired. Let's do it really fast so we can be prepared for April. Let's go! Now, before we get started, obviously, a few things to remember. 1, like, comment, subscribe, okay? Very simple rules of YouTube we have going on here. I make these videos every month. I also put out gaming content every month. If you want to watch more of that, subscribe down below. 2, I'm live on Twitch literally every week. 2 to 3 times a week, playing Mario Super Sluggers, doing trivia, doing all this kind of stuff that you can see on the YouTube live. Please go follow over there. And a couple other things. If you want to watch my movie reviews, come in as I do them. Letterboxd absolutely will be down in the description. And same thing with that TikTok. If you want to watch anything related to my gaming content in short form, I've been putting out YouTube Shorts as well as TikToks also will be down there. With that being said, guys, I watched a lot of movies this month. I've been to some series, and I'd like to start talking about them, alright? So let's fucking go. I started off this month by watching Scream 4, 5, and then a couple days later, I ended up watching Scream 6. I watched the first half of the series last month, and I continued it into this month. And let me tell you, there are few series that I have watched throughout the entirety of a chronology of a series that are this high quality as the Scream movies. Generally, if you like 1, you like 2, you're gonna end up liking 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I don't know if this is kind of a unique opinion that I have, but I think that because of the way everything is structured, because it's around satire, parody, and just kind of modeling the way that these films have been put out off of other sorts of sequels, that they know how to properly bend the genre to make it work for them. The violence is really nice. The story plays out very well. I was never bored watching any of these movies, especially considering most of them came out over 10 years, 20 years after the original trilogy. And I think that it just stands to be a testament of how quality these films are. My favorite of these past 3, I would say, was Scream 6. Scream 6 was very, very good. I think the experience of watching it in a theater also was a little bit different. But let me tell you guys, if you want to get into entry-level horror, you want something that's actually gripping and interesting in terms of a story, without having to worry about jump scares and being super frightened of the supernatural or whatever it may be, I think this is a great gateway into something that get you into a very interesting genre that I feel like I've been lacking a lot. So if you want to go check out these movies, absolutely do. And if you're interested, here is my freaking ranking of all the Scream movies, right here. Fight me in the comments. Okay? Scream 1 is fucking goated, and Scream 6 is also fucking goated. Alright? Chef Jon Favreau, writer and director and star of this movie, who decided to cast himself opposite Scarlett Johansson and Sofia Vergara, in which he was in former relationships with both of them. Eye of the Beholder, I guess, guys, right? But regardless of that, I think this is just a very feel-good movie. On the surface, you can tell exactly what this movie is about. It's about a struggling chef. He wants to find the passion in making food again. I think that what they do especially good of a job in this movie is shooting these intimate, very exciting cooking montages where you get to see him and his friends and his son just enjoy the world of food together. And there's nothing really more to it than that. It's about how someone learns to be a better person, a better father, through reigniting his passions. And if you're a foodie, if you like watching stuff like this get made, it's going to be a great movie for you. But overall, I just think it's a very lighthearted watch that you don't really need to think about. You can throw it on the background while you're eating dinner. It's super nice. Absolutely worth the watch. Then I watched EZA, and I'll be completely honest with you guys, I watched a lot of movies last month, especially series. This one kind of has left my head since then. One thing that I will say, though, is that Emma Stone is fantastic in this movie. I love her chemistry with the other actors. I love her charisma, and generally as an actress, I think she is just phenomenal. So it's not really a surprise to me that my favorite part about this movie was her. Sandman from Spider-Man 3 is in this. Got a random Fred Armisen cameo. I think that generally the writing was pretty funny. Just not something in this kind of era of like late 2000s, early 2010s comedy that really sticks out to me. I did enjoy it, mainly because of Emma Stone. So if you like Emma Stone, give this a watch. If you don't, maybe give it a skip. I don't know. Then I watched every single Rocky movie. I've never seen a Rocky movie. I grew up 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. I've never seen a Rocky movie. I'll try and go through them pretty fast. I think that once you get past a certain point, they're very similar. Rocky 1, incredibly compelling story, incredibly compelling character arc for a character that is just beyond likable. Rocky Balboa is one of the most likable characters in any movie I've ever seen. it's such an intimate look at a person who has just been beaten down his entire life and wants nothing more than to be given a shot to be something more than what he is. He's kind, he's caring, he's very outgoing and wants to involve other people in his life. He has this very special relationship with a person who's very introverted and just really wants to see the best in them. His and Adrian's relationship is one of the, like, primary reasons why I think that not only Rocky 1 is the best Rocky movie, which I doubt anybody would tell you different, but the reasons why this series is so interesting is if you just focus on Rocky as a boxer, where is the juice? Where is the interesting kind of development for him as a character? Like, you know what I mean? What does he have that's worth fighting for? And you could say that about himself, but I think that you see throughout the movie that Adrian gives him a reason to fight harder. And you see this with his relationship with Adrian, his relationship with Paulie, and his relationship with this Coach Mickey. Like, he's an absolutely badass, indomitable spirit, drive until you get the fucking job done guy. And even though, you don't always see him succeed in the best of ways, he's improving and he's getting his shots. That's the underdog story at the end of the day. All we want is to belong, and all we want is to prove that we have gas in the tank, that we can do it at the end of the day. We can give it our best shot and still feel happy about what we've done. So this absolutely knocked my socks off the first time I watched it. I genuinely thought it was a perfect movie. Watched it again a little bit later with my girlfriend. I was like, this is great. Not perfect. Little bit long at points, can drag a little bit, but I think that the way that they present Rocky as a character is just magnifique, fantastic. And I think that the way they follow it up with Rocky 2 and his rematch with Apollo Creed, who I would also like to say, fantastic heel, fantastic opposition for Rocky, essentially models like people who want the opposite things out of their relationship with the sport of boxing. Like, Apollo's way too focused on fame and fortune and, like, maximizing his potential in the boxing ring, when Rocky just really wants to prove that he is worthwhile as someone in the sport, not someone who's, like, doing it to max everything out. And you see that he tries to, use his money from boxing to, like, feed all of his ego and, like, get a bunch of fancy clothes and cars and, like, get a house and stuff. At the end of the day, he's just like, what does it mean if I'm not spending time with my wife, right? Like, with the things and the people that matter in my life. You see, Apollo is completely different. Which is why the fight at the end is so satisfying. One of the best endings to a movie I have ever seen. This includes Rocky 1. I think the ending to Rocky 2 is fucking phenomenal. Such a fucking good job they did with that. I know I'm letting it fly, but God, I think that genuinely, had Rocky 3 through 6 not come out, it's a perfect duology of movies. It's a perfect two. Perfect original and a perfect sequel. So if you take anything out of this, if you're not interested in, Rocky as a character after the first two movies, whatever. The first two is like one of the best pairings of movies I've ever watched, especially because it chronicles Sylvester Stallone and his career. He wrote all of these movies, by the way. Rocky 1 and 2 especially are incredibly well written. Just absolutely blew me away when I found that out. I don't know if I've been sleeping on Sylvester Stallone or what, but he's fantastic. Rocky 3 through 6 starts on a downward trend. Rocky 3 and 4 are very similar. Clubber Lang and Ivan Drago, very compelling villains. I think they are the most important parts of these movies, and they're the reason why you want to watch them in the first place. Rocky 4 is super campy. Rocky 3 is a bit more serious, tries to take along the same kinds of concepts that were presented in Rocky 2, just kind of, at the end of the day, I think the downfalls of 3 and 4. 3, the ending is super anticlimactic. I think that Clubber Lang is interesting, and the training montages with Creed and Rocky are what are interesting about this movie, outside of, like, the main villain being cool. The story isn't super cool, but he's cool. With Rocky 4, you have Drago, who is just this massive hunk of a man, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's just, like, Cold War fucking bullshit. And you get some really campy, like, Russian montages, and at the end of the day, you're like, oh my god, we're all united as a people, why do we need to fight? You know what I mean? I think that he becomes more compelling as a character because they make him a character in Creed 2, which I'll talk about later. And if I don't get into this, wow, I loved him in that movie. Jesus Christ. He's basically nothing. He has some crazy one-liners, like, if he dies, he dies. I must break you. Shit is wild. Craziest one-liners in the series. But outside of that, like, the fight is really, it's fine at the end of the day. Rocky 5, it's a character assassination. It's terrible. The movie takes Rocky as a person, and because he's supposed to have brain damage, he's now a terrible person. He's training this guy that is also a terrible person and doesn't really care about him and only just wants him so that he can become famous in a similar way to like Apollo Creed did, not in the same way that Rocky did. Don't watch this one. I will not really speak more on it than that. It just takes all the things that you like about Rocky, his charisma, his like caring for his family, his wife and his son, and just throws it out the window for someone who just wants to keep boxing even though his head's been bashed in a bunch of times. And then I will say with Rocky 6, Rocky Balboa, it's compelling. It's interesting that he's very old and like gets called out by this young guy and wants to go and train and prove he's still got gas left in the tank, which is the premise of, Rocky 1. But the villain, the person he's fighting, no juice. Absolutely nothing. He has nothing worth writing home about. Why is he doing this? It's just for him. There's a couple of good lines on Rocky's end. It was well written in some aspects, but it's just nothing. It doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. Rocky 5 at least had a story that saw Rocky fall very far down and then come back up. Rocky Balboa doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of a repeat of what happened in Rocky 1 with a lot less sauce. So I'll explain my rankings at the end of the day, but I know this was very long-winded and probably worth, maybe putting it on 1.5 times speed for this one. But I like this franchise a lot. Rocky 1 and 2 are now some of my favorite movies, and I think that when you're talking about like sports movies, I think a lot of the time the character of the athletes gets lost in the sport itself. I think it's very hard to portray both of those perfectly, but I think that Rocky 1 especially does a great job with portraying the athlete and the sport very well. And then Rocky 2, I think, specifies a little more with the sport, but also does a great job with the character acting. So yeah, love these movies. Glad that I got to watch them. Don't watch the later ones. All right, we'll get into it later. Luther the Fallen Son. I watched this one with my family while I was home, actually, over my sister's spring break, and it was pretty average overall. My mom really likes the TV show. I've watched a few episodes of it. I think it's pretty interesting. But overall, just really did not leave much of an impact on me. I think that's why a lot of movies that sit around my, 5-6 range that I enjoy, but just, don't really move me one way or the other, you know what I mean? They just kind of are in and out. I thought the plot was interesting enough to hold my attention. Nothing that I hadn't really seen before in things like Criminal Minds and similar shows. I thought the performances from Idris Elba and Andy Serkis especially were pretty interesting, but outside of that, nothing really to write home about. I finally got around to watching Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and honestly, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I, for one, love stop-motion animation. I love how beautiful and gorgeous this movie was, especially the intricate characters specifically. I thought the set pieces were interesting, but especially the way that the characters were modeled and were expressed through this kind of animation, I would just love to see it so much more. I think that as someone who's been doing a kind of a deeper analysis on early Disney and their Pinocchio, that just this breathes so much life into a story that I think has basically none in the original Disney movie. Guillermo del Toro did a great job. I can't say his goddamn name. He did such a good job of breathing a sort of meaning into Geppetto, where he's just kind of this nobody in the original Disney movie, and in Del Toro's version, he is someone who's mourning and looking for more meaning in his life, and Pinocchio brings that, but in a way that he's not expecting. And the way that everything unfolds and the way that the classical story is framed as this sort of more politically charged and more adult way of thinking about this story is really interesting to me. And I just, it's not the best thing ever. I don't think Pinocchio is an amazing story, but this version of it is definitely my favorite that I've seen. I'll admit I was a bit of an All Quiet on the Western Front hater, especially during the Oscars ceremony, which I hadn't watched at this point. I think this is the day after I watched the Oscars. On my plane ride home, decided to watch it, and I think it was a very quality film. I think that some of the things that stuck out to me, not necessarily the dialogue, but the story as a whole is very well written. The main actor's performance is fantastic. I think that some of the supporting characters do a good job, mainly because of the way the story flows, not necessarily the way that they talk. But the main character specifically, fantastic, amazing job. Not saying he was snubbed from any Oscar categories or anything, but just very moving performance. The cinematography and the imagery and the way that things are portrayed, I also thought was very interesting. I also haven't seen a lot of war movies. I don't know if because I haven't seen a lot of war movies, this might be more impressive than I think. The main thing that I have to gripe about, I didn't think the dialogue was super great. I also didn't think it needed to be 2.5 hours. I thought that it was absolutely dragging towards the end, and at certain points just wasn't super engaged with it as I was on a plane trying to focus on the movie. But there were a lot of things to like. Best score, though, I don't know. Best visual effects and editing, really good on the technical side. Yeah, give this one a watch if you're looking for maybe a new kind of genre if you haven't seen a war movie before. I think this is a good place to start. Lots of good things to take away from this. An ending, oh my god, jeez Louise. In watching Del Toro's Pinocchio, I did end up revisiting the original 1940 Pinocchio put out by Disney. I have a lot to say about this, and I'll get more into it in a future video, I think, hoping to have that out in the next few months. But my overall takes, I've seen this twice now. I liked it better the second time. Appreciated the animation a little more. I think for its time, absolutely does a very, very good job at incorporating things like the weather and vehicles and stuff that really hadn't been super well animated before at the time. I think the story is a little too long, which is wild because it's an hour and a half, especially coming from like a Guillermo del Toro movie that's closer to 2 hours, where I didn't really think that dragged at all. Pinocchio kind of sucks. There's not a lot of likable characters in this movie outside of a choice few that are minor, I would say. And overall, I just feel like this is one of those movies that people tell you to return to because it has so much value in it, but I just think everything about it has been eclipsed with future entries in Disney and in future animation. So if you want a Pinocchio to watch, I'd say watch the Del Toro one. But if you want to look back on something, kind of get a vignette of what the animation was like at this time, this isn't a bad place to go. After watching all the Rocky movies, I obviously had to watch the other Creed movies, both on HBO Max, and great. These were good. I think that some of the fatigue that came with the later Rocky movies is not at all present here. It's a very unique story based on something that we already know, sets the scene very nicely, has a very unique take on this kind of not even an underdog story. He's coming from a place where he feels like an underdog and just wants to prove something to himself, which at the end of the day is all Rocky's trying to do. You know what I mean? You get that same kind of indomitable spirit and that drive that you see in Rocky in someone coming from a very different place. Michael B. Jordan is fantastic. I thought that the first movie kicked ass. I also thought that the second movie kicked ass. The Dragos in the second movie made it kick a lot of ass. I thought the story kind of tapered off on Creed's end in that movie, but overall, I do think that at the end of the day, Creed is a very interesting character. I thought it was nice for them to be able to tie back in Rocky as well. I thought Rocky, Sylvester Stallone did a very good job, especially in the first movie. Wasn't as active in the second movie, but very present, and did a great job of including him in a realistic scenario in which that he is back in Apollo's life. Adonis, rather. So if you want my take, I think that these movies especially kind of capture the magic of the first two Rocky movies, just on like a de-escalated sense a little bit. The boxing sequences have a lot of juice. It's very interesting to see how they shoot it. I think especially Creed 1, shot by Ryan Coogler, I believe, he's a fantastic director. You can tell the heart and soul he put into the establishing shots for him and tying it in with how the story progresses. Just masterful job. He does a great job with bringing everything all together. And I think it suffers a little bit in the second movie in his absence, but, you know, a lot of the stuff that's interesting is still there. I will say his relationship with Tessa Thompson, I think that Tessa Thompson does a great job. Also, just, it's very much in the back burner. I think that Adrian and Rocky just is very front and center in those movies. The relationship dynamic between the two of them is just not as compelling, I guess is what I would say. Still like both of them as actors and as people, just not super involved in that. So if you want to know what my opinion of all 8 of these movies looks like, right there. I haven't seen Creed 3 yet still, so I don't know. I would imagine it would be somewhere around in that Creed range, unless it absolutely flops. I have no idea. But yeah, that's how I generally feel. It's a fantastic series. I'm really glad that we get to see its continuation, and I'm just sad that I didn't get to have this in like high school. I feel like this would have been such a cool movie to have seen in high school. Then I watched every Hunger Games movie. All of my friends love these. A lot of my friends are girls, to be fair, but they just are like, Colin, have you not seen them? I don't know, man. I didn't read the books. I got the books spoiled for me when I was a kid. I was just very Hunger Games averse as a child. Against my will, I've been shown the original and Catching Fire a couple times, which I will speak on. If we're going to go in order, I'll give it a little lightning round. Hunger Games 1, very interesting. A little campy as a story, how it goes. I think it's a bit too long to set the stage for everything. Jennifer Lawrence, pretty compelling in this movie, I would say. Josh Hutcherson, also very compelling. I think that's his name. Does a good job. Katniss and Peeta. Great job. Side characters also do a very good job. I think the way that the story is structured is very inviting, gets you into the world, gets you to understand it. Little politically charged, not as super on the surface there, but pretty well done. Good YA stuff, very interesting. Nothing to write home about. I thought the editing was pretty weird in it, and I also think that it's a bit too long. So that's why I'd say it's a bit below there. Catching Fire. Wow. Does not need to go this hard, has so much juice. The story is so just intertwined. The politics and the uprising and the revolution and everything is just so intertwined in the way that they act and how they choose to rise against a government that's basically oppressing them. It's telling them against their will to go and fucking fight each other. We don't give a shit about what we said before. We can make you do whatever we want because we're that powerful. And it's a great story about rising up and showing that together, as long as you choose not to let them pitting you against each other and let them win. You know what I mean? Just absolutely goes crazy. I think that even it being longer than the original Hunger Games, I think it earns its runtime. It has a lot of very interesting side stories, a lot of character development on a lot of different sides, new side characters being introduced. Finnick, especially. I think Jeffrey Wright is also fantastic in this movie. But just really good. It has the juice. If you're gonna watch any of these movies, Catching Fire, you really don't need to watch the first movie, if I'm being completely honest with you. Mockingjay Part 1 and 2. I think that Mockingjay Part 1 is interesting enough on its own. I understand why they split these movies. I know YA novels kind of getting split into Part 1 and 2 last novel doesn't really make a lot of sense. Mockingjay is dense, dude. This whole, like, consequences of an uprising and what it does to the people, especially the people on the ground floor, is very interesting to me. But I think it kind of loses some of the juice once you get to Part 2. Some of the character development is just not as cool. I think that Jennifer Lawrence is just definitely not as compelling in those two movies as she is in the first two. Maybe it's just because of the result of you being with the character for so long and not agreeing with all the decisions that they make. But in my opinion, it just kind of it tapers off towards the end. I think that anybody would agree with you. I honestly don't have much to say about the last two. It kind of went in and out. Catching Fire really stuck with me. Ranking right here, the answer is that Catching Fire is the best, and then it just is, downhill from there. But, definitely inspired somebody to write a cooler book about a revolution and an uprising, so. And then spawned a bunch of books about districts and shit, so, take it or leave it there. But Catching Fire fucks. Go watch that one. And to close out this month, I watched Reservoir Dogs. It's actually on the poster back there that I have 100 movies that it's like a scratch-off thing. I'm planning to watch them all with my girlfriend, but I didn't know at the time, so I did watch it without her. I've seen many a man hype this movie up on TikTok and Twitter. I just don't necessarily think it lives up to the hype. I like the movie. I give it a solid 7 out of 10, maybe 8 if I'm feeling generous. But just nothing that really enveloped me. You know what I mean? I was in, I was out. That was a good movie. That was it. You know what I mean? Tim Roth's performance, I thought was fantastic. That was my main takeaway from the movie. I thought the script was pretty interesting. I liked the concept. I just don't really think that, I don't know, compared to other movies that I've seen of Tarantino's, like Django and Inglourious Basterds, and even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to some extent, I just felt like it's just missing a little juice. I don't know. I like how everything played out. It very clearly is one of his first movies, and he's still kind of refining his style, which is cool. But I don't know. Just not my favorite thing in the world. I did like it. I enjoyed the script and the story, and especially Tim Roth performing as his character. Outside of that, you know, watch another one of his movies is what I'm saying. But I mean, I'm not even a denier. I'm just like I'm indifferent basically. Good movie. Good movie. And that's the end of the video. Yeah, woo! I know it wasn't as quick as I wanted. I just had a lot to say about Rocky specifically, so that's why. Would also like to point out this month I watched Shrinking on Apple TV Plus. If you have Apple TV Plus, watch Shrinking. Absolutely fantastic series. 30-minute episodes, comedy. Jason Segel, Harrison Ford, both hilarious. 100% worth your time. And here's the rankings of all the movies I watched. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe. Go check out all my socials in the description if you want more of me. If you don't, then get out of here, I guess. Remember, I'll be watching movies, but, get out of here.